Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you all could be out here this morning. Thank you for that reading, Charles. Appreciate it. I have a story I want to start out with, but I want to ask you a question this morning. I always do this lots of times. What do you think heaven will be like? If you had to describe heaven to someone in your own words, how would you describe heaven to someone? Think about that for a moment. I want to start off with this little story. A Michigan couple decided to go to Florida to thaw out during a particularly icy winter. They planned to stay at the same hotel where they spent their honeymoon 35 years earlier. Because of hectic schedules, it was difficult to coordinate their travel schedules, so the husband left Michigan and flew to Florida on Thursday, with his wife flying down the following day. The husband checked into the hotel. There was a computer in his room, so he decided to send an email to his wife. However, he accidentally left out one letter in her email address, and without realizing it, his error, sent the email to someone else. Meanwhile, somewhere in Texas, a widow had just returned home from her husband's funeral. He was a minister who was called home to glory following a heart attack. The widow decided to check her email, expecting messages from relatives and friends. After reading the first message, she screamed and fainted. The widow's son rushed into the room, found his mother on the floor, and saw the computer screen, which read, "To my loving wife. Subject, I've arrived. Date, October 16, 2004. Message, I know you're surprised to hear from me. They have computers here now, and you are allowed to send emails to your loved ones. I've just arrived and have been checked in. I see that everything has been prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you then. Hope your journey isn't as uneventful as mine was. P.S. It's stinking hot down here." Are you going to the eternal home you think you should? Are you going to go to that home when you pass from this life? We're going to go over this morning 7 myths about heaven. In Matthew 22:2 it reads, "The kingdom of heaven is like the king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son." Now let's consider it's a wedding banquet, not a funeral. Billy Joel sang a song that said, "I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. The sinners are much more fun, and only the good die young." You know why most people don't like church? Either they show up at the wrong one, or they just don't know the reality of salvation. Church gatherings should be a celebration. Like church should be, heaven is a party. God's place is not going to be a black tie affair, as we do it at a funeral. We do have, quiet people wearing black, long drawn faces, solemn, sorry for your loss, boring, long, sad. Too many churches are like funerals. And too many Christians act like church is a funeral. Do we act like that here? I hope not. Or do we understand that the kingdom of heaven is going to be an exciting event when we get there? Or if Jesus comes and gets us? And now, I'm not talking about being like some churches today that have bands and choirs and entertainment. What they, and even us for that matter, fail to realize is when we come together to worship God here on Sunday mornings or any time, it's not about us. It's not about how much we can get entertained. It's not about how much fun we can have. Nothing wrong with having fun here. But it's about God and how we worship Him. Remember in Jesus' time, when they had a wedding, it took 7 days That's how long they celebrated the wedding. Yes, 7-day celebration. This would be a party of immense proportion. I've learned why some receptions are boring. The fun you have at a wedding is directly proportionate to the level of friendship you have with the happy couple. The best weddings are the ones where you know the most people, which only stands to reason. Do you know God's people? We're a small congregation here, so we pretty much know everybody that comes in. But there are congregations of thousands that maybe people don't even know everybody that attends church there. I remember back when I got my job at J&L Steel in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, there was 12,600 guys working there. And I would meet someone out and I'd say, I work at J&L, and they'd say, oh, by the way, do you know this guy? And I'd say, no, I don't think I ever met him. And they just look at me like I was crazy. You know, but there was 12,600 guys working there when I got hired. You know, and now it's gone. It's just nothing. But the idea I'm trying to get across to you here is that we should know God's people. We should love each other here. This should be a place of refuge for us, a place where we can come and get encouraged. That's why I like Wednesday night service so much, is because it just charges your batteries for the rest of the week, because Monday, Tuesday, you're getting beat up by the world. Wednesday you come and you get refueled and you go about your business. Now think about knowing everybody for a moment. Do we take the time to get to know each other? And really, there's a time when we can really get to know each other, and that's when we have a dinner down in the basement. I sat and talked with Carl one day for I don't know how long. And I was really fascinated that I didn't really know him, you know what I mean, until I sit down with him and talked about his industrial accident, and talked about the, different things that had happened to him in life, and, his teaching and stuff like that. And I really got to know him, you know what I mean? And that's when we can take that opportunity to really get to know each other. And more importantly, do we know God's Son? Do we personally know God's Son? Heaven has no food or dancing, just singing saints playing harps. I've never been to a wedding where there wasn't food involved. Can I tell you something? God, who created the earth and the universe, knows a little something about throwing a party. A few years ago, the world was dazzled by what has been called the wedding of the century. The wedding of Donald Trump and Melania was one of the most grandiose weddings that the world will ever see, probably. The guest list for the wedding and reception only contained 350 names, but those invited were of the highest in society standing. The list contained members of royal families around the world, high-profile actors from Hollywood, former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, and Regis Philbin. The bride was given a diamond-studded platinum wedding ring that was worth about $1.5 million. Her wedding dress was made of white Duchess satin. It had a 13-foot-long train, and was crowned by a 16-foot-long veil. It took 1,000 hours of labor from 28 seamstresses to put it together, including 550 hours spent in embroidering more than 1,500 crystal rhinestones and pearls in swirl patterns that covered the dress. That dress cost around $200,000. Then there was the cake. It was 7 tiers high, 32 inches in diameter, and weighed 50 pounds, and was topped by 3,000 white icing roses. The wedding's final cost is unknown, but it was certainly well into the millions of dollars. The cheapest thing that was listed on the gift registry at Tiffany's was an $8,500 porcelain fruit basket. there was only one thing that was done to save a few dollars. Mr. Trump did his own hair. Today we are talking about another wedding celebration. It's the celebration that God is going to hold, a heavenly celebration, and that will not even compare to the one that I just described to you. It's not going to be the wedding of the century, but rather the wedding of the universe. Heaven will not be boring. Oftentimes when Jesus uses a parable to describe heaven, it had a party in it. A woman finds her lost coin. She throws a party. A prodigal son comes home. The father throws a party. A parable about a wedding feast thrown by a king, which we just read about. There will be singing, but it will be great singing. When we sing, we should be warming up for heaven. When we sing the rest of the songs here today, let's really sing them like we're singing to God, because that's what we're doing. We're singing directly to God. He's listening. Point number 3. We often think we have plenty of time to get ready for heaven. The invitation went out, the story that Charles read us, but the people ignored it. And they paid the price. They didn't recognize the urgency in the invitation. Can I suggest to you today that it's time to think about heaven? It's time to think about where you're going to end up when you pass from this life. Notice the mistakes of the people in the story. The first group refused. That refers to the Jews. Jesus says in John 1:11, he came to his own and his own did not receive him. The second group ignored it. This refers to the busy, the hurried, the caught up in this life people who have made time for kids, for college, for careers, for mates, for pastime, for fun, and for hobbies. And in their increase and successes, they neglect the God who gave them the ability to increase and succeed. Sometimes we put God on the back burner. Sometimes we take God for granted. Everything that you own and everything that you possess, God gave it to you. God blessed you with all that stuff. Your children, everything. In verse 5 it reads, but they made light of it and went their way, one to his own farm and the other to his business. These people that were invited figured they had better things to do. Are we the same today? Do we have better things to do rather than live for God and do what he asks us to do? Consumed by consumption, supersized and paralyzed by the present prosperity. Busy with busyness. Number 4, heaven is only for good people. Verse 10 reads, so those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. The invitation went out to all. And consider some of the worst people in the world. The son of Sam, David Berkowitz, he actually led Bible classes in prison. And he also denied himself the opportunity for parole because the victim's family suffered too much for him to be released. And he became a model inmate. Jesus said, there is only one who is good, and that is God. Number 5, I can get to heaven on my own terms. We are a people of options. We like options. You can have it your way. You know, the Burger King advertisement. You can have it your way. We like options in cars. We like to get our cars with all the options we can get. Power windows, power seats. Now they got heated seats. They got all kinds of stuff that could go wrong. That's what I think about when I think about options in an automobile. Just something else that can go wrong. But that's what we do. Then we get to the end of the story, and there's a man there that actually showed up, but he wasn't prepared to show up. Jesus ends this story with a strange occurrence. There is a man in the crowd without the wedding garments on. It was typical protocol for weddings that everyone be outfitted with a garment provided by the king, so that all the subjects would look the same and only the bride and groom would stand out. This man had believed his garments to be adequate and fine enough, so he refused the king's garments and wore his own. Have you ever been underdressed for something? Maybe went to a job orientation or something and then you didn't expect it, but they made you stand up and introduce yourself and you were maybe not dressed for it? I explained it in another way. When I went to Summit Racing to get a job, I went dressed like this. And I seen people there with tank tops, flip-flops, and shorts on. The guy said, go over there and sit down and fill out the application and bring it over and lay it on the table and then we'll call you. So I filled mine out and I went over. Everybody else filled theirs out and went over. I went over, put mine on the table, and I'm walking out the door and the guy says, hey, come here. I walked back over to the table. I said, what's up? He says, I'm going to take you back for an interview. So he takes me in the back. So when I sat down, I says, there were 20 guys out there. I said, how come you stopped me and you're going to take me in for an interview? He said, did you see how them guys were dressed? He said, would you hire them for a job if they came to an interview dressed like that? And I said, no, I don't think I would. This guy came, he showed up. He made the effort of showing up, but he didn't make sure that he was prepared. If we're going to show up on Judgment Day, there's no doubt. No doubt in my mind at all that everybody in this room is going to show up on Judgment Day. But if we're not prepared, that's going to be the problem. What this man believed was the false assumption of too many people. You can be good enough to enter heaven. Can we ever be good enough to enter heaven? Not really. When you really come down to it. We're going to make it. I mean, there's people in this room that are going to make it. I hope we all make it. But the idea is we have to prepare here on earth in order to make it. This is the devil's best and most destructive deception, that we believe that we can just show up and go in. Number 6, when I get to heaven, I will be able to explain myself to God. I don't know how many times I've heard people tell me this. I'm okay. When I get to heaven, I will explain to God. And that's because of all the jokes about the pearly gates and the jokes about St. Peter being waiting there for us. But I got news for you. It won't be nothing. There won't be no joke about it when you get there. I'm a good person. I know God will let me in. When I see St. Peter, I'm just going to explain myself to him. I've never killed anybody. Hell is only for those who've killed people, like Hitler or Charles Manson. I'll just tell God that I did my best. When the man was in front of the king, he was speechless. And the awe of God is going to make us speechless also. Because our decision is already going to be made. Matthew 22:12 says, so he said to him, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. The man never bothered to make the proper preparation for his entrance into the banquet. Down here on earth, We are so brazen with God. But in heaven on Judgment Day, it's going to be a different story. If you think you're going to tell God about why you belong in heaven, you might have the wrong idea about the situation. Like a lot of people did for the job interview that I mentioned before. They came in just thinking they could just walk in however they were dressed and get the job. That happened to me twice. I went to another interview and the same thing happened to me. They called me in for the interview and the rest of the people were sent on their way. And he told me the same thing. It's because you prepared. You came dressed like you should. You know, and that's what God expects of us. He expects us to be dressed in a robe that's at least presentable to Him. And a body. And a spirit. It's like that too. Some say God knows my heart. He knows deep down I'm a good person. And the Bible says this in Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? It is the evil we see in the world today, the selfishness, the depression, the destructive behavior of our families and our own bodies, adultery, fornication, addiction, all come from within our own heart. Last but not least, only heaven exists in the afterlife. The man was cast into outer darkness. And in Matthew 22:13 it reads, Then the king said to the servant, Bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Today the idea is that there is no hell. It's considered absurd, and it's considered to be just a myth, is what it's considered. Jesus spoke more about hell than He did about heaven when He was here on earth. Hell was prepared for the rebellious angels, but those people who reject God's invitation to heaven are destined for hell as well. Let's examine together the story of the rich man and Lazarus found in Luke 16:27 through 28. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked the sores. So it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried, and being tormented in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in the water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. The rich man then said, I beg you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. Now, if you believe that story, I believe it to be true. I believe that when we die, we're going to be where we're going to be. That's my belief. It's just my belief from reading this story. That the decision is already made. We will be in judgment. We will be at judgment. But I think that our decision is going to be sealed when we die. Our destiny is what I'm trying to say. And this rich man, he wasn't a bad man. He really wasn't a bad man. He was a loving man because he loved his brothers. What did he say about his brothers? He wanted his brothers to be saved from what was going on with him. So he loved them enough to do that. So he may have been a good person. But he didn't make it. He didn't make it to heaven. Let's think about this for a moment. What will heaven be like? And even more importantly, where will you end up when you pass from this life? The decision has to be made here. It can't be made when you're before God. Because once you get to that line, you're either going one way or the other. If you have a need this morning to be baptized, we can take care of that need for you. If the lesson has touched you in such a way that you need to come forward and have prayers at the church to rededicate your life to God, we can also do that for you this morning too. Please come as we stand and sing.